When Eilat Mazar realized she discovered an ancient structure near Jerusalem, she turned to the Bible to help explain what she found.
Before she passed away, archaeologist Eilat Mazar talked about a hidden discovery deep under Jerusalem's Ophel area. She believed it could change how we understand a nation's history. She found huge walls, ancient royal seals, and items from faraway places. Some thought these were proof of King David's palace, while others called it a risky story. What Mazar found might be the closest we've come to knowing the truth. To understand why her discovery was such a big deal, let's look at Jerusalem's history, the place she was digging, and who she was. Eilat Mazar came from a family of archaeologists. Her grandfather, Benjamin Mazar, was a famous archaeologist who helped shape how we study Israel's past. Growing up, Eilat heard stories about his amazing discoveries, so it's no surprise she followed in his footsteps. As a child, she loved Bible stories. She didn't just enjoy them, she believed they were true and could guide her to real places from long ago. This made her different from many other archaeologists. Most experts saw the Bible as a collection of inspiring, but not always accurate stories. They thought it was better to focus on physical evidence like artifacts and ancient writings. But Eilat disagreed. For her, the Bible and the objects she found were two pieces of the same puzzle. She saw the Bible as a map to uncover important discoveries. Her work wasn't just a job, it was her passion and mission. Eilat Mazar dedicated her life to proving that major stories from the Bible were true. Her biggest goal was to show that King David, a powerful leader, really existed. She wasn't just searching for old objects from the ancient kingdoms of Israel and Judah. She wanted to find the actual place where King David ruled. Mazar focused her search in Jerusalem, but she had her eye on a specific spot that others ignored. She believed the key to understanding David's kingdom wasn't in some far-off cave, but right in a place called the City of David. For years, she wondered about one big question. Where was King David's palace? She thought the answer was hidden in a little-known area mentioned in the Bible. Many people thought her idea was just a dream, but Mazar had faith and a strong plan. She was ready to uncover the secrets of the City of David. Jerusalem is a city full of history, faith, and mystery, built with stone for over 1,000 years. The well-known Old City, with its big walls and gates, isn't the oldest part. To find the truly ancient section, you need to go south to a small hill called the City of David. This is the oldest part of Jerusalem, where people lived thousands of years ago, long before the Romans or Crusaders arrived. According to the Bible, this hill was once home to a group called the Jebusites, who thought their city was so strong that even the weakest could defend it. They mocked the Israelites, but they didn't expect David, a skilled warrior, to outsmart them. The Bible says David found a secret way into the city through a water tunnel, took it over, and named it the City of David. He then built a grand palace there, turning the small village into the capital of a strong new kingdom. The City of David became the main city where kings ruled and prophets shared their messages. For many years, archaeologists have been drawn to this area, hoping to find evidence of these famous stories. In the 1800s, a British explorer named Charles Warren dug tunnels under the hill and found parts of an ancient water system. Later, another British archaeologist, Kathleen Kenyon, spent years digging but believed the Bible's story of a grand kingdom under King David was exaggerated. She thought the area was just a small Iron Age village, not a great capital. Eilat Mazar's grandfather, Benjamin Mazar, also dug near the Temple Mount, but didn't explore the spot Eilat later focused on. Despite all these efforts, no one could find King David's palace. It remained a mystery only written about in texts. The city's history was like a puzzle, with a missing piece. Many scholars and historians started to think that either the palace was never as big as the Bible described, or it had been completely destroyed over time. Explorers searched everywhere, but found nothing. However, Eilat Mazar believed they were looking in the wrong place. She based her ideas on a single Bible verse that others either didn't understand or ignored. Her trust in this clue was about to shake up the world of archaeology. For Eilat Mazar, the answer was right there in the Bible she studied closely. One specific verse from the book of 2 Samuel chapter 5 verse 11 caught her attention. It says that Hiram, the king of Tyre, sent messengers to David with cedar trees, carpenters, and builders to construct a house for him. This was the clue she had been searching for. Instead of focusing only on the palace itself, she thought about who built it and what materials they used. The mention of Hiram, the leader of the powerful city of Tyre, was her first major hint. This Bible verse showed that the person building the palace wasn't a local worker. Instead, important foreign leaders and skilled experts were involved. This explained why Mazar thought the royal home was made with costly materials brought from other countries. To her, it was clear proof that David's kingdom wasn't just a tiny village. A powerful king like Hiram would only send help to another king of similar importance. This thinking led to what's called the Mazar hypothesis. She believed a palace built by foreign builders wouldn't be ordinary. It would have grand, impressive features worthy of a great king like David. It made sense that the palace would stand as a symbol of David's strength and his new, mighty kingdom. But where exactly would such a building be? Mazar was sure it would be on the highest and safest spot on the hill. She focused on a specific area called the Ophel, an elevated ridge that links the city of David to the Temple Mount. At the top of this ridge stood a huge step-stone structure that had puzzled archaeologists for years. It was like a series of giant terraces, almost like enormous stone steps carved into the hillside. Mazar believed this was the Mio, a terraced foundation system mentioned in the Bible in connection with the city of David. The books of Samuel and Kings even say that King David and King Solomon strengthened the Millo. In her view, a palace created by foreign builders for a strong king would naturally sit right on top of this massive, human-made stronghold. It was a daring idea, maybe even too bold, because most of her fellow experts saw the Bible's stories about the kingdom's kings as made-up tales. They thought these stories were created to give hope to the Israelites during a time when they were forced to leave their homes. Many argued there wasn't enough physical evidence to prove a big kingdom existed in the 10th century BCE. To them, the tales of David and Solomon were more like legends than real history. Many archaeologists thought Mazar's trust in the Bible was a mistake. They believed it was foolish to base her work on a single Bible verse and a waste of time and money when there were more important things to explore. The archaeology world values solid evidence and logical ideas, so they were skeptical of her approach. But Mazar didn't give up. She stayed committed to her belief and moved forward, even without full support from other experts. She had a clear plan and a specific spot in mind. In 2005, she finally got permission to start digging. People were watching closely, expecting her bold idea to fail. She was ready to uncover something no one else had thought to look for. Mazar and her team began their work in the summer of 2005, during Jerusalem's scorching heat. But the high temperatures were the least of their concerns. They set up their dig site at a specific location Mazar felt confident about, a place in the northern part of the city of David with a huge, ancient stone structure. This structure looked like a giant staircase that had stood there for thousands of years. Other archaeologists had studied it and moved on, but for Mazar, it was the key to her theory. She believed King David's palace was built right above it, close to where the city of David began. Her team worked carefully, clearing away layers of dirt, rocks, and history, one bucket at a time. As they dug deeper, they found something exciting. Thick walls made of large, strong stones that didn't look like those used for ordinary homes. These stones seemed to belong to an important building. They also found objects near the walls that appeared to be from the 4th to 6th centuries, a time that lined up with King David's era. These discoveries were promising, but Mazar knew they weren't enough to prove her theory. Jerusalem had many significant buildings in ancient times, and these items could have come from any of them. To find the truth, she needed to dig deeper into the oldest layers of the site. Mazar knew exactly how deep to dig because archaeologists can tell time by studying the layers of earth. She and her team were searching for a specific layer from the Iron Age, a time around the 10th century BCE, when King David and King Solomon are believed to have lived, according to the Bible. Finding this layer would be the proof she needed to support her idea. Every scoop of dirt brought them closer to their goal. Though the work was slow, Mazar was confident it would be worth it. As they dug deeper, their discoveries became more surprising. They uncovered a huge structure, much larger than anything they'd found before. The walls were thicker, the stones were bigger, and the size was unlike anything else from that time in Jerusalem. As they kept digging, it became clear this wasn't just another old building. The stones were massive and carefully shaped, far different from the usual stones used back then. These weren't just piled-up rocks. They were huge, well-crafted blocks. They also found a grand entrance and the base of what looked like a tower, which made Mazar even more certain. She felt closer than ever to finding the palace she'd spent her career searching for. The structure was enormous and had a royal, impressive look. It had the kind of design you'd expect from a king's home or an important government building. Some stones weighed several tons and were finely cut, showing that only a wealthy and powerful leader could afford to build something like this. It matched the Bible's story of King Hiram of Tyre, sending his best builders and materials. This discovery challenged the idea that Jerusalem in the 10th century BCE was just a small, unimportant village. Instead, it suggested Jerusalem was the center of a strong kingdom, with a king and a capital city that reflected his greatness. To confirm the age of the structure, Mazar and her team turned to scientific methods to test their theory. To figure out the age of the structure, Mazar and her team studied the layers of soil they were digging through. By carefully removing each layer, they could see that the palace was built right on top of the oldest layer at the site, which dated back to the Iron Age, around the 10th century BCE, the time when the Bible says King David and King Solomon lived. This was a big clue, but the most important evidence came from small broken objects they found in the dirt, especially pieces of pottery. Different styles of pottery were used at different times, and by looking at their shapes and designs, experts could figure out their age with great accuracy. Inside the palace's foundation, they found pottery from the 10th century BCE, matching the time of King David's rule. The size of the structure and its age supported Mazar's theory perfectly, and it surprised many who doubted her. But even this wasn't enough to convince everyone. The huge stones of the palace were impressive, but critics argued they could belong to any important building, not necessarily a palace. To prove her case, Mazar needed something more, something that could link the structure to the people who lived there. Then, her team found a small clay seal called a bulla, buried in the dirt just outside the palace wall. These seals were used long ago to close letters or documents, like a signature or stamp to show they were real. At first, the tiny clay piece seemed unimportant, but when they cleaned it, they found an inscription that was astonishing. It read, "Belonging to Hezekiah, son of Ahaz, king of Judah." Hezekiah was a king who ruled Judah 14 generations after David, and he's mentioned in the Bible in books like Kings, Chronicles, and Isaiah. One verse, 2 Kings 18:5, highlights his importance, saying he was unlike any king of Judah before or after him. 3 years later, they found another small clay seal with the name Gedaliah, son of Pashur. This discovery shocked Mazar because Gedaliah is also mentioned in the Bible, in the book of Jeremiah, as someone who worked with another person to oppose the prophet Jeremiah. These finds were powerful evidence connecting the site to important figures from the Bible. Finding 2 clay seals, called buli, that belonged to 2 officials mentioned in the same Bible verse, right where Mazar believed King David's palace stood, was almost unbelievable. This was more than just luck. It was a major clue. For Eilat Mazar, this was the moment everything fell into place. The seals weren't just bits of clay, they were solid proof that people named in the Bible actually existed. It showed that the Bible stories were based on real history, and that these people lived and worked in the very spot her team was digging. The seals gave names to the people who once used the palace, but Mazar's discoveries didn't stop there. She was about to find evidence of King David's own actions. While the seals were an amazing find, Mazar knew the biggest connection to the Bible's story was right in front of them, even though other archaeologists had seen it for years and didn't realize its importance. This was the stepstone structure, a huge set of stone terraces built into the hillside. For a long time, experts thought it was just a support system to hold up buildings on the hill. Impressive, but not much more. Mazar had a different idea. She believed this massive structure was the Milo, a giant defensive wall mentioned in the Bible that David strengthened after he captured the city. The word Milo means fill, and that's exactly what this structure was, a huge stack of stones designed to support and protect the city. Mazar argued that this stepstone structure was part of the fortress of Zion that David took over. She believed the palace, which she called the large stone structure, was built right on top of this existing Milo. This meant David's palace wasn't just a new building, but part of a larger, well-planned fortress system. The king's home would have stood at the highest, safest point of the city, overlooking everything. Her findings showed that the palace walls were built directly into the top of the stone terraces, perfectly matching her theory. It suggested that when David captured the city, he started a massive building project to create a strong, fortified capital for his new kingdom. At this point, everything seemed to fit together. No part of it felt like a coincidence anymore. The evidence clearly showed the Milo was used as a defensive structure. The step-stone structure was a huge, sturdy wall that would have been tough for enemies to get past. Its stones were placed to form a steep, hard-to-climb surface, giving strong protection to the city above. Discovering a grand palace at the top of this wall made sense for both defense and leadership. A king would want his home in the safest spot, where it could also display his power. Everything seemed to fit together perfectly. However, Eilat Mazar's discoveries were met with a lot of doubt from other archaeologists. Her ideas were bold, closely tied to the Bible, and seemed too perfect to some. Since her findings matched the Bible's story so well, some experts were skeptical. This caused a big split in the archaeology world. On one side were people, including many traditional Christians, who thought the Bible held some historical truth. On the other side were skeptics who believed the stories of King David and King Solomon were mostly made up. They argued there wasn't enough physical evidence to prove a large, powerful kingdom existed in the 10th century BCE. They thought if King David was real, he was likely just a small-time leader of a village, not a grand city like Jerusalem. To them, Mazar's claims seemed too convenient. Critics had specific reasons for doubting her. First, they questioned the timing, saying the Iron Age layer she found might be from the 9th or 8th century BCE, when Jerusalem was starting to develop. If the structure was built later, it couldn't be King David's palace. They also suggested the building might not be a palace. It could be a temple, storage building, or fort built by another king. While they agreed the stones were impressive and fit for an important structure, they said it didn't prove it was a royal palace. As for the clay seals, bully, critics noted that although the names matched Bible figures, they came from a later time, closer to the era of the prophet Jeremiah. Critics said the clay seals didn't prove the structure was King David's palace. The names on the seals were interesting, but came from a later time. They also argued that the Bible's term Milo was too unclear and could mean many things, so calling the step-stone structure the Milo was a stretch. Eilat Mazar stood firm. She believed all her evidence, pottery, soil layers, and the building size and craftsmanship, showed it was built in the 10th century BCE, during King David's time. She explained that the seals, found near the palace, could belong to a later king who built on David's foundation, as the palace was likely used for centuries. To her, the evidence was clear and undeniable. Her work started a big debate, making archaeologists rethink their ideas. The question changed from, did King David exist, to how large was his kingdom? Despite the doubts, Mazar kept digging. In 2010, her team made another exciting find just outside the Ophel, the ridge connecting the city of David to the Temple Mount. They discovered a huge city wall, even more impressive than before, along with a grand entrance gate. Pottery found with the wall dated it to the 10th century BCE, the time of King David and King Solomon. This was powerful evidence. If Jerusalem was just a small village, why would it have such a massive wall and gate? Together with the palace, this showed Jerusalem was a thriving capital with a strong government and a powerful king during the United Monarchy. Mazar's discoveries kept proving her point, but her final project focused on the city's ancient water system. The Bible tells a well-known story about how David's general, Joab, captured Jerusalem by sneaking through a water shaft, as mentioned in 2 Samuel 5:8. For years, experts debated whether this could really have happened. The ancient water system, first found by British explorer Charles Warren in the 1800s and named Warren's Shaft after him, looked too narrow for a surprise attack. Because of this, many experts thought the Bible's story was just a made-up tale. In her final project, Eilat Mazar didn't just dig up the palace. She went back to the heart of the debate, the Gihon Spring and Warren's Shaft. She argued that earlier ideas about the water shaft were too basic. Her last work, published after her death, explained that the Fortress of Zion wasn't simply a stone wall. Instead, it was the whole protected area around the Gihon Spring, which was the city's only source of water. Protecting it would have been the most important task for any king. To Mazar, David was smart enough to capture and control this entire fortified water system. Mazar's career was about much more than discovering a palace. It was about shifting how the entire archaeology world viewed history. She brought back the study of biblical archaeology on her own and made her critics rethink their own ideas. Even today, not everyone agrees with her, but her discoveries are now a key part of discussions about ancient Jerusalem. The debate goes on. Is the large stone structure really King David's palace? The evidence, like the pottery, clay seals, and massive stones, suggests it could be. But without a clear sign that says, this is King David's palace, we may never know for certain. What do you think these ancient ruins tell us about King David and his kingdom? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our new videos. If you enjoyed this, check out the next video on your screen for more stories like this one.